Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Tricia Zunker of Wausau is the Democratic candidate in the 7th Congressional District. Tricia, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
Well, let's see. There was a special election, and you must have learned a lot. But let me ask you this. In the general election leading up to, of course, the campaign to November 3, your top issue to be the next congressperson from the 7th?
Well, we have to get through this pandemic first and foremost. There is just too many things that are left unaddressed. I have talked to so many workers that still don't have access to PPE. We are 6+ months into this pandemic, and it is inexcusable that our frontline workers don't have the protections that they need. So we need to make sure that we get through it, that nobody loses their home, is evicted, goes bankrupt because of this pandemic. We need to make sure that people have what they need, whether it's the extension of the unemployment benefits, the PPE, and we need to increase testing. We know that the way to get this pandemic under control is to make sure that people are tested, so that people that need to be quarantined, maybe they're asymptomatic, but we want them to be quarantined so they're not out spreading it to other people. So this is first and foremost what we need to do. You know, I did learn a lot of lessons in the special election. In the last 9 weeks of that campaign, we had to turn to a virtual campaign because of this pandemic. And I wouldn't have envisioned that we'd still in September be campaigning virtually, because this could have been under control months ago.
Well, let's break down some of those items that you just mentioned. Do we need a national moratorium on evictions and foreclosures?
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair that people should lose their homes or be evicted because of this pandemic. We need to prioritize our spending. We can certainly come up with a way to make sure that everyday households are covered, that nobody ends up on the streets or trying to find somebody to live with because of this pandemic. So many people suddenly lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Small businesses that need protections, ongoing protections, lost their sources of income. So we really need to rally together as Americans, not Republican, Democrat, or independent, but as Americans, to get through this pandemic so that we can stop this avoidable loss of life. We're at 180,000 plus Americans that have now died from COVID-19. That's 180,000 plus families that are grieving, my own included. It's touched my family a few weeks ago. And it's horrific and it's upsetting because it was avoidable. But yeah, we absolutely need to rally together as Americans to get through this together.
Senate and House leaders in Washington are at a complete gridlock on the next COVID-19 package. Do you think, if you were a member, would you be advocating for a renewal of the $600 per week additional benefit? President Trump ordered $300. Wisconsin just qualified for the $300. What are your thoughts on the amount of the additional benefit in addition to Wisconsin's max of $370 per week?
Well, I think that, first of all, this gridlock you mentioned is unfortunate. You know, we're seeing this too much right now, this hyper-partisan politics, and we need to get back to a place where people might be different political parties but can still work together. And that's something that I am committed to doing, is making sure that we have respectful communications, listen to one another, go to the facts and data as a source of decision making. And as it relates to this amount, I do support the $600 amount. That's what people were used to getting. That's what kept them floating in their households, allowed them to have money to spend out in the local economy and allow those small businesses to remain afloat. So I think something is helpful, certainly, but I think it should be consistent with what people were used to getting.
I'm just curious, your $600 a week, would you extend that for 2 months, 3 months, or through the end of the year?
I don't think that there is a crystal ball here. I think we need to extend it and reevaluate as necessary. But until this pandemic is under control and people can resume their work or find new jobs that are permitted, once this pandemic has hopefully lifted, we need to make sure that people are taken care of through it. So I think reevaluation is necessary. But at the same time, people do need to have some source of security. So 1 month certainly doesn't feel like enough. I think through the end of the year is reasonable.
What about the president? He has said, I want to do away with federal payroll taxes through the end of the year. Do you support that? He says, of course, that people would have a little bit more in their biweekly or weekly paychecks if they didn't have to pay federal payroll taxes. What's your position?
No, I think that this is an incredibly reckless and dangerous tactic to take. This is really an attack on Social Security. And if this payroll tax is eliminated or suspended, it's not going to take long to deplete Social Security. I just read something a couple days ago. I posted about it on my campaign social media that with this policy that President Trump and his administration are pursuing, Social Security would be wiped out by 2023. And this is an earned benefit. People need to be able to retire with dignity. Disabled individuals need to be able to live with dignity. And survivors that suddenly their lives are turned upside down because their loved one has been killed, they need to be able to live with dignity. All of these different things are supported by Social Security. So things like suspending the payroll tax, I don't support because it is an attack on Social Security, and we need to protect and expand Social Security.
These COVID aid packages from Washington cost trillions. Potentially, we're raising the federal deficit from 23 to 27 trillion. Do we have to set aside those concerns over the national debt to fight the immediate problem of COVID? Or your thoughts on addressing the exploding national debt?
We have to prioritize our spending. And there's a number of different things that we can do. We need to make sure we put the funds towards COVID-19 so that we can stop this avoidable loss of life and get this virus eliminated from our country. So we need to put the money towards that. But we can prioritize our spending, and there's a whole bunch of different ways. Number one, we need to tax the millionaires and billionaires their fair share, and we need to tax the corporations as well, their fair share. We need to stop putting money into a border wall. This is, 20th century, or this is first century technology, a border wall. We need 21st century technology to deal with that issue. So this border wall is a waste of money. We need to stop funding never-ending wars and bring our troops home where they can be safe and focus on things here in America. And there's other things that we can do, absolutely. We can decriminalize marijuana, right, and have immense tax revenues that come from that. Right now we have this hodgepodge approach from state to state. Even here in Wisconsin, on two sides of us, it's become legal in the state. It's confusing. This hodgepodge approach just isn't ideal. But also the tax revenue that can arise from that is something that can help with this deficit. And it'll also help in that we can get our nonviolent offenders out of our prison systems. We over-incarcerate in this country to such a degree, and a large segment of those individuals are nonviolent drug offenders. Let's get them out of prison. Let's give them hope and a future, and that'll also lift some of the expenditures as well. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. It just comes down to prioritizing spending.
When you talk about no longer paying for never-ending wars, does that mean that you would cut the budget of the Pentagon?
Well, I think that, these are different things that we need to evaluate carefully, but I think we need to bring our troops home. And to the extent that cuts the budget of the Pentagon, then that would be necessary. We need to focus and invest on individuals here. And, I support our troops, and I'm so thankful for the work that they do. But let's keep them safe and bring them home.
The U.S. Supreme Court just said it would hear the legal challenge to Obamacare after the November 3 election. If the Supreme Court invalidates Obamacare, what, as a member of Congress, would you want to replace it?
That's a very scary possibility, because over 20 million Americans would be without health coverage. And I don't think anybody should go bankrupt or anybody should die because of a medical situation. I have met people before the pandemic hit. You know, this is a huge congressional district, 26 counties. And I put thousands upon thousands of miles on my car getting throughout this district, listening to people, hearing their concerns. I've talked to people that have told me about their health issues. That I met a 71-year-old woman who said she can never retire because of a medical issue that came up in her life, and she has to work the rest of her life. You know, that's not what life is about. So if that situation were to happen, I think we have to just come right back at it and say, and work hard to make sure that Americans have access to affordable, quality health care.
Well, the presidential candidate Joe Biden of your party has suggested in the past a kind of a public option. When other Democratic leaders, of course, want universal health care. Where are you on those two options?
Yeah, I support a robust public option, absolutely. I think that we are making our way towards universal health care, and I think that's a great discussion. And I certainly would like to see development to that extent. I don't know that it can happen as quickly as people are hoping. So I think maybe I'm a bit of an incrementalist, but at this point, I support expanding the Affordable Care Act, and I support a robust public option.
We know a lot more how an emphasis on some police officers treat those in their custody than we did 6 months ago. What national policing reforms do you support?
Well, I think training is first and foremost critical, and training needs to be ongoing. You know, these maybe annual trainings that are just a day or a half day, that's not sufficient. There needs to be ongoing training. This really is a local issue, but governments have to work together, local, state, and federal. And certainly the federal government, to the extent that there are funds available to help support the states and the local municipalities, should make that available. So we need to have training. We need to have support for victims. We need to make some changes as it relates to requirements to serve in law enforcement. And so there's some of those things would be important. I certainly support our law enforcement. You know, where I am here in Wausau, we have really great law enforcement. I back the blue, as they say, but we are seeing, you know, these issues arising with some, you know, egregious violations that those officers must be held accountable for those actions.
What's your message to the young people who the DACA, those who were brought to this country as children? That's another issue. That's another unresolved issue. What should happen to those DACA now young adults?
Well, I will always come out on the side of compassion. And these are individuals that came here as children through no decision, no choice, no fault of their own. And I'm glad they're here. As an Indigenous woman, I recognize that diversity is a beautiful thing in our society. But these are individuals that are contributing members of society. They are living the American dream. And I support a pathway to citizenship for those individuals.
Okay. When President Trump blames terrorists and Antifa and others, saying that they want to erase the nation's heritage, how do you respond to that as a candidate for Congress?
I just find it to be so disappointing. It's not leadership. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that was avoidable if President Trump himself took it seriously when he was informed about it. And right now we're seeing all of this political grandstanding and trying to point to other things to take the focus off of the fact that people continue to die at a daily rate from this virus. So I just think it's not leadership. We need somebody that's going to unify the country. And we need to see this at all levels. There's just become so much ugliness. And I just find that to be so problematic. I'm a very goal-oriented, results-oriented person. And the reason I'm running is because I believe in public service. I've been given an opportunity that my relatives didn't have. And I believe in making change and working towards that. And it seems like there are individuals that's not their focus, and that's unfortunate.
Republican leaders of the U.S. Senate have said the next COVID-19 package should include this provision. If you're a business or an organization that has followed CDC protocols to protect customers and employers, you should be immune from lawsuits. How do you feel about that proposal?
Yeah, I support our small businesses. And certainly if there's a concern about a frivolous lawsuit, I can understand that, but I don't support this proposal at all. I think we need to be focused on proactive measures, not reactive measures, in that we should make sure that workers on the front lines have protection that they need, in that we need to increase testing so that people aren't getting sick and dying at these alarming rates. I think we need to focus on keeping Americans healthy and safe, and not this kind of reactive measure. Also, I can tell you with my legal background, this notion of protecting from frivolous lawsuits, if it is indeed a frivolous lawsuit, one can always make or pursue a motion to dismiss on those grounds. So I think that this is, again, some political grandstanding. I think that we should focus on eradicating this virus, keeping people alive, and that I don't support that provision.
The environment and tourism, critical to the 7th Congressional District. What changes need to be made, or what protection should be added in either of those to enhance and develop the economy of the 7th District?
Well, that's true. We have some of the most beautiful lands here in Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, and with COVID-19, there was huge concern how it was going to affect the tourism industry. And I believe that those businesses should have the protections that they need. They shouldn't go out of business because the pandemic hit and they fell victim to it. But we need to make sure that our lands stay protected. I'm so grateful for the Great American Outdoors Act that recently passed with huge bipartisan support. Protects our public lands and spaces for recreation for generations to come. And I would be so grateful to see more bills that focus on protecting the environment.
You lost a special election to Congressman Tiffany. You're going to oppose him on November 3. Any comments on positions he's taken since he won the special election, or differences between you, and the major differences between you and Congressman Tiffany?
Absolutely. So where do we start? So Congressman Tiffany's very first act as congressman was he introduced legislation along with Congressman Banks from Indiana that would withhold federal funding from our schools if they don't physically reopen by September 8th. This was introduced in June, and I found this horrifying because I'm school board president of one of the largest school districts here in Wisconsin, the Wausau School District, and I know firsthand that we need more federal investment in our public education, not someone who threatens to take it away. We get about 10% of our funding from the federal government, and that is funding that is directed towards services for low-income households like free and reduced lunch, or services for children with disabilities. So these are some of our most vulnerable children. So Congressman Tiffany's first act as congressman targeted some of our most vulnerable children. I take great issue with that. Also, I take issue with the fact that he knew it wasn't likely to pass the Democratic-controlled House. So all it was a waste of taxpayers' money and political grandstanding. He should have been focused on something to help our students and teachers during virtual learning, like expanding rural broadband access. That's what I would have been focused on. That way our students and teachers would have access to the tools that they need in situations of mandated virtual learning. So that is one issue where, I take great issue with that. He also voted against the Great American Outdoors Act. I mentioned that incredible bill has bipartisan support. He didn't support that. He voted against the bill to remove the Confederate statues from the Capitol. I would have supported that bill. He voted against H.R. 2, the Moving Forward Act. This is an incredible bill that will modernize infrastructure, modernize our healthcare system, our schools, roads, bridges, transit, bring good jobs here, expand rural broadband access, which is a huge issue here in Wisconsin 7. He voted against that. And he recently voted against the Delivering for America Act, that emergency session that was convened just a couple Saturdays ago to fund the Postal Service. Now, it's really disappointing to see people take a position against the Postal Service when it's historically it's been a nonpartisan issue, right? People rely on the mail, especially here in Wisconsin 7, once again, because we have such rural areas. So whether it's seniors, veterans, disabled populations, rural folks that rely on the services of the U.S. Postal Service for medication, supplies, benefit checks, etc. The fact that he voted against funding the Postal Service is also very troubling. I would have voted in support of that. And just one other last thing was recent child care assistance. There were 2 child care bills as it relates to assistance during COVID-19. And we know our working families need that support. I know firsthand how difficult childcare is generally as a solo parent, and he voted against that. And he also called on Governor Evers to resign a couple months ago. And again, please focus on passing legislation in Congress that will help us here. We need a representative, not this political grandstanding. So there's a lot of things, as you can tell. But yeah, we're quite different. I think it's been very clear to the people of Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District that we don't have somebody representing our interests here. And we need somebody that's going to represent the hardworking families and households here in Wisconsin to make sure that people have what they need, that people have opportunity, that people aren't struggling because of the pandemic. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. Whether people vote for me or not, I'm going to work hard for everybody in Wisconsin 7.
Thank you. Tricia Zunker of Wausau is a Democratic candidate in the 7th Congressional District. The election is November 3. Tricia, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.